Ben, here
Hey,
again.
Daniel. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to be in this podcast about corporate governance for small, medium, big companies. Ben, Mr. Doctor, Mr. Profit Doctor is his company. Can you give us a small briefing of your company in 1 minute?
Sure. My background is with some larger companies like Dell and Microsoft. And when I was at Microsoft, one of the things we did is we hired a lot of contractors to do marketing, project, and program management. So I started a consulting company that basically sold contractors marketing and marketing analytics back to Microsoft. And now I've kind of made the next evolution, which is to coach and provide consulting for CEOs of small and mid-market companies in the staffing, recruiting, and consulting space on how to improve their company profitability. And so that's essentially what I do now. I'm the profit doctor to CEOs in staffing, recruiting, and consulting.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Okay, doctor. So when I tell you corporate governance, what it comes to your mind?
Corporate governance seems like it covers a variety of things, whether that's things like compliance, whether that's following the rules of your organization so that major decisions are voted on and, brought to the board of directors, for example. And it almost seems like it could cover a lot of core management decisions. Should we turn left? Should we turn right? Should we go straight ahead? So it seems like it could cover kind of a variety of things.
Okay. You as an entrepreneur, what do you think? We, the entrepreneurs, should establish these kind of mechanisms of corporate governance where we can take decisions by voting, by policies, by committees. What do you think?
It feels to me that so much of this is based on the size of the organization. Clearly a 6-person organization doesn't need a 5-person committee. That doesn't make any sense. And then at the same time, 120,000 person organization might have a whole bunch of different corporate governance layers, maybe by geography or division by division. So I think it's very, very contextual there. But I guess I would say, I think it's very important to balance, just say the need for oversight on one hand and not to make a mistake, on that side. And then here on the other side, you still have to push the business forward. And that is like serving customers, making and delivering your product, collecting. And so I think that there needs to be a balance between how much energy is spent making decisions, ensuring that decisions are within compliance or make sense with the overall strategy of the organization. And then there actually also needs to be, hey, we need to cover some ground, we need to execute. So I think having a balance of those two things would be
okay. So thank you. And so arise me another question. As an entrepreneur, you know that we, the entrepreneurs, are kind of alone in a lot of decisions. And sometimes we take decisions that are in the wrong way. That's why we are entrepreneurs, right? Because we take the risk, of course. So what would you say it's a good size of a company or a revenue company that will be a good practice to establish a committee or a corporate governance to take better decisions? What will be that perfect, or if it's not perfect, a suggested size, either or in revenue or in people?
I'm not sure I have a direct answer for that. I think I might answer that a little bit from the side, which is, I think every company of any size, it makes sense for the founder to have, we'll call it their board of directors. And so if that is a 1-person organization, maybe their board of directors is a mentor or two, their husband or wife, and a good friend who's in a related industry. But then obviously, if you're Dell or Microsoft or some other multinational company, it's going to be much, much more rigorous. So I would say that, I think every entrepreneur or every CEO or every owner or every chairman, they owe themselves to have essentially, quote, a board of directors. Now, in a larger companies, it's going to be a much more formalized set of processes. But in a much smaller organization, maybe it's more informal. It's kind of your like board of advisors. It does bring to mind a story that Jeff Bezos is famous for talking about, which is he says that at Amazon, they have one-way and two-way doors. It's kind of like a metaphor. And the idea is that a two-way door is a decision that you make a decision, you walk through the door closes behind you. But if after you go through, it turns out to be a really bad idea, you can go back out and, go backwards and change your mind. And he basically says, if the decision is a two-way door, he wants his managers basically going through doors very, very quickly with an emphasis on action. However, if it's a one-way door, like once you go through that door, you really can't go backwards. Then those are the ones that he wants, multiple committees, if you will, to get together and really make sure, particularly if it's a big, important decision, because you can't go back. And so I guess what I would say is, we really want owners and CEOs to be action oriented. At the same time, there are some really big, important decisions. We'll call it like strategic one-way doors that, need to have a lot of due diligence and discipline with making those decisions.
Pretty interesting. So I'm maybe going to put a little bit more on fire with this. Don't you reckon we have to pull best practices of big global companies to the small, medium companies to seem less crash the small companies? The small, medium companies, many times they crash, they fail because bad decisions, because one person decision or two persons decisions without external views or professionals. So that's what I'm putting a little bit of fire. Why don't we pull these best practices of big companies of what they do without doing these small companies bureaucrats, or slow or long due diligence, but fast, agile process of taking decisions with more informed tools or with more information around. What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things in what you said. The first one is, should medium-sized companies take on best practices of large companies? And I guess I would just say, well, it depends what the best practice is, and it depends if it's suitable for a smaller company. So when I used to work at Microsoft, there used to be an analogy that people would say that a large organization is like a battleship, with the idea that it's very slow to turn that battleship because there's so much momentum going on there. And I used to actually have two other analogies that I would say. One was, I would say that Microsoft isn't a battleship, it's an armada. It's a fleet of battleships. And it's incredibly slow and difficult and time consuming and resource intensive to shift direction even a little bit. However, once you get up to speed going in a certain direction, the firepower of that armada is an awesome and breathtaking thing to behold. And so, there's good and bad with being so large. It's hard to turn, but there's an incredible amount of momentum behind you once you get up to speed. And so I would just say, as a mid-sized organization, I would be very cautious about adopting big company best practices and make sure they're really going to fit for my sized organization. I mean, there's only a handful of companies that are worth $1 trillion that can afford to do the kind of things that those companies do. And I'm not sure that their best practices necessarily fit another company that's a $100 million organization. So I would just say I would be cautious there, because we need to always maintain, I would say, a bias for action. I would also say that as a smaller company, there are some existential things that come your way, and you don't want to step too quickly or too foolishly in regard to that. And I think having again, whether it's an informal board of advisors or a more formalized council of people who can weigh in on that, I think that would be very advisable, in particular for these really big kind of life-threatening type decisions.
Very interesting. I don't remember if I share with you that I'm taking the EMP in Boston. You know, the EMP.
Outstanding.
Yeah, the EMP, just to let people know, it's a program which is an entrepreneurial master program, which is made by MIT in Boston for EO organization. And it's pretty much for only the members of EO, right? So they gather 60 entrepreneurs from all over the world, from all over the EO, and gather it in Boston to work with this to professionalize and institutionalize their companies, right? And one of the things that they push a lot in this program is, of course, professionalize and scale, you know, pretty much. But at the end of the day, they push as well the institutionalization. Sorry, in Spanish it's difficult, more in English, you know. So institutionalize the company. So what you said is gold. Is fantastic. I agree with you. You know, you can't take all the best practices just like one size fits all. No, that's right. That's for sure. What do you think these guys are trying to push the entrepreneurs to go in that direction?
You mean EMP? First of all, congratulations on being accepted into the EMP. That's a big honor and a very prestigious program.
Thank you, Ben.
So, are you saying that at the EMP they're pushing corporate governance, or they're pushing to institutionalize things?
Yeah, that's right. They're pushing, first of all, scaling up the company, 10x, 100x, whatever. Then, of course, in the same time, professionalize, but with the visual end of the road of institutionalize the business, right? To make a company your business, because sometimes what the entrepreneurs have is a business, it's not a company, right? Because they said it depends on you. You have the keys of the bank, of the back door, and you take 5 decisions, and if you don't take them, the business just fall down, and then they push to go to that way of company, whereas the institution works for you. Maybe I put it that way.
Right. Yeah. So the way I've often heard that put is that if your business relies on you for everything, you have a job, not a company or a business. And so I would totally agree with that. And I suspect that at the EMP or with these other, business schools, very prestigious business schools, when they're talking about institutionalizing things, they're talking about taking the knowledge and systems and processes out of the entrepreneur's head and building them into the fabric of the company so that the entrepreneur doesn't have to be there all the time, or they could sell the company to someone else. And that entrepreneur's special sauce, if you will, is built into the company, not into the entrepreneur who sort of has to overachieve every day for that business or company to be effective. So that makes total sense, particularly as you scale. And that's a combination of like professionalizing, typically with other outside hires that you bring in who come in with a more senior level of experience. And then, systems and processes and institutionalizing the knowledge of what you're doing so that that company can carry on without the entrepreneur. That makes total sense. However, I think they're also likely very proud of how nimble and fast and able that these small to mid-sized companies are to adapt to new market conditions, to take on new customer types, new product opportunities, and really maximize that. And I'll just tell you that is not what is generally part of the fabric of these largest companies. And in many cases, kind of a related group to MIT, I think it's called Birthing of Giants, they talk about how large companies are often buying entities out of private equity, which are then buying private companies in an effort to use that as an avenue for them to innovate. So I think the key here is, yes, you want to take some, quote, best practices from some of these larger established entities, but you don't want to kill that spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation, because in many cases, that is the value that both private equity and ultimately larger acquirers might be seeing in your business.
Yeah. It's like Ichak Adises. Have you heard about Ichak Adises from Adises methodology? No, this new consultant. She's been around for many years. He says that in a graphic, we see the company when it starts, it's pretty fast, it's pretty agile, but it's uncontrollable. It's disorganized, right?
Chaotic.
When he's growing, of course, it's more bureaucracy, but more control, of course, and it's less agile. So he says, in the middle, where are you, where you can still be agile, fast, flexible, but controllable, right? But visible of everything what you are doing. So I think it's a great challenge for the entrepreneur going to this perfect zone of flexible and productive. I think, because big companies, as you say, like I love how you pitch Microsoft, right? As a big armada, or many armadas, it's amazing. But they can fail maybe 3, 4, 5, 8 times, and they have the cash flow behind to make it again, right? But not we as an entrepreneurs. So let me drop you another question. You reckon CEOs, founders, the founder CEOs don't like the control of board of directors, or don't like to hear another advices of a board of advisors that go against the thinking or the decision that he's going to take? Like, we, the founders, are kind of rebels as entrepreneurs.
Sure. I don't want to say 100% of entrepreneurs are rebels, but I think it takes something different to create something from nothing than it takes to manage something that already exists. And while there are people who can, span a variety of these things, those people are few and far between. I used to be in this consulting and staffing world, and my clients would come and they'd say, I want somebody with really excellent business context and skills who's also incredibly technical and get down in the details. And I was like, those people exist, like Bill Gates. They're just hard to find and super expensive to find people who are like top-notch business thinkers and top-notch technical people. Very, very hard to find people like that. So it's incredibly hard to find people who can, start something brand new and then keep scaling it through we'll just say there's like, I'm going to make this up, like 5 levels of growth, from like 1 to 100, and then like 100 to 1,000, and then 1,000 to 10,000, and then 100,000. I mean, the kind of problems that you're facing when you're growing from 10 to 100, it's almost like nothing in common with growing from 10,000 to 20,000, right? So to find the same person who can do all that, hard to come across. And I think that's where entrepreneurs need to get crisp on where their skill and their passion is. If your skill and passion is creating something from nothing, and we'll just say scaling it to 1 million or 10 million or 100 million, like that might not be the same person or the same passion to take it to the next level. And, I don't have a right answer. I mean, it's very contextual, but I do think it's worth considering that, many times people who are going to be on that board of directors are probably more established, larger company kind of people. And, it's a good question. Do they have the chops to give advice in that early fast growth, or do they have it, maybe further on down the road? And I think it's just important to make sure that the right people are advising the company at the right time and in the right context. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, I want you to really invest in this thing because it's going to be important in a year, or, hey, we need to do this or we're going to be out of business tomorrow. So I guess those are some of my thoughts on that topic.
I love it. Yeah, I love it because it's true, in the way the company is scaling, resources are different. Not only the management, but the staff, the team, the technical equipment, the markets change. It's more hot, it's more cold. It's a lot of things happening around. You are right. Absolutely right.
There's an interesting book that I might point out. It's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it's written by a very well-known and highly esteemed executive coach. His name is Marshall Goldsmith, and kind of the principle of it is usually what gets people to be, let's say, promoted to manager or mid-level manager is often because they're a really good individual contributor. They're smart, they're hardworking, they can figure stuff out, they get good results. But in many cases, figuring stuff out on your own, working extra hard to deliver that result is actually not the set of skills that is going to help a senior manager be effective. A senior manager maybe needs to be strategic, needs to, do the good job in terms of hiring and putting the right people in the right seats, and then maybe getting out of the way, which is almost the exact opposite of a really powerful individual contributor. So I think it's really interesting to just be clear on, when is the right time in either that business's maturation or that business cycle for what kind of skills and what kind of people.
Great. I love it. Ben, thank you. Thank you very much for this time. Your insights, like always, are great and very, very insightful, absolutely, with all your experience in companies, in big companies, and experience right now as an entrepreneur. Thank you very much for this podcast, which is corporate governance. And any advice that you can give to all these mid-sized companies that are listening to us? They are listening pretty much middle management and founders. They are listening to us and saying what can they learn from this? So any advice that you can give, Mr. Doctor?
Absolutely. Well, first off, Daniel, thanks so much for inviting me on your podcast. It's been a pleasure. And I guess I would say that I teach a little course called Profit Myths. And the idea is, what are myths within general business that get in the way of companies being successful? And one of those is that growth is good and growth is sort of number one and very important. And what I would say is that there's so much emphasis in the marketplace, in press, in media, in what people talk about on top line revenue growth. What I might point out is that keeping score on the top line is kind of all for show. Keeping score on the bottom line is generally what really counts. And so what I would say is that in almost all companies, bottom line is more important than top line for almost all different kinds of companies, because most companies are, number one, they're valued as a multiple of net profitability or EBITDA versus top line revenue. And secondly, in addition to being valued on that, that's what produces cash flow, and cash flow is king. And so why not cash flow great for the next 5 or 10 years before some potential exit into the future? And I even think that exit would be better. There's a book called, I think it's called Small Giants by Bo Burlingame. Really interesting book. It talks about a lot of mid-market companies that have decided, hey, we don't need to get bigger, we just want to get better. And, one of the core milestones of their idea of getting better, is generally excellent delivery and satisfaction with their clients and improving bottom line. and almost always improving satisfaction and compensation for employees. And so I think in many cases, there's no need to be 10 times bigger if basically you're already at a size that if you had solid profitability, you could have incredible financial freedom for the owners of the company, do a good job for your clients and a good job for your staff, for your employees.
Love it. I just put it here, and we're gonna put it on the lines behind the two books that you are recommend us, Small Giants and What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Yes.
Thank you for your
Profitability eats growth for breakfast. I'm gonna rip off. I think that's like a Tom Peters line that he says it differently about something else, but I think he says culture beats, I don't know, financial performance for breakfast or something culture,
like that. Strategy eats eaten in the breakfast by culture.
Yeah, culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say profit eats growth for breakfast every day.
Okay.
So there you go.
I'm going to put it because I'm going to do another podcast of this. Yeah. I have
Daniel, so good.
I have a lot of insights from you. Thank you, Ben. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. We're going to put all your links in linking here behind under the podcast where they can find you. We have your info already. Thank you very much, Ben. Okay. Say hello to Mexico over here. Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego, Ben.